Hi, this is Kevin, and welcome to the my briefing video on Chapter 4 of the Pinkham book, Django Unleashed. And Chapter 4 is where we learn all about how to use Django templates. And we, when you follow the book, which I would like you to do. I'd like you to read through the chapter, and I'd like you to make sure that you can get the code in, at least by copying the files. Okay, and I'll kind of show you how that goes for me. When you do that, you don't have a lot that will run at the end of chapter 4, and that's unfortunate. But it's kind of the approach that Pinkham takes. He would like to have all the information about the templates, or most of the information about the templates in the template chapter. Okay, so he doesn't spend a lot of time on giving us information about the URLs in view, and the URLs in view are what control the action. Okay, and if this were the classic model view controller architecture, MVC, the URLs in view are what make up the controller. And so it doesn't help all that much to have a template, which corresponds to the view in model view controller. It doesn't help a whole lot to have the template if you can't control the action and send action to the template. Okay? So what happens in chapter 4 is we create one template that we hook up in the URLs, and we hook up in the views, and we have a template for it, and somewhere over the course of the chapter we are able to get that to run. That turns out to be the one of the index pages, which he calls a list page, and I'll show you that working before we get done. Okay. At the same time, he has us code pretty much all the template pages, or the beginning set of the template pages, but we're not able to test them. And the reason that we're not able to test them is that they're not hooked up, right? Now, why does he do that? Well, because he doesn't want to give away all the secrets of how to hook things up in the chapter about the templates. Okay? Now, that's going to have an effect on how we're going to do what we're going to do. So, I'm going to walk you through the chapter now, and then I'll show you what you should be able to make work in the end, and I'll wrap it up for you. He begins the chapter by another hello world example, and the good thing about the hello world examples that he has is that they emphasize how do things get controlled in Django, okay? And things get controlled in Django in two ways. The request comes in from the browser. It goes into the URLs module. From there, we pick the view that it's going to go to. So then it goes to the view, and the view controls all the action. Okay, so the combination of the routing that comes from the URLs and the true action control that comes from the view, that's what makes things happen. So here, when we are revisiting this homepage that will put out hello world again, we're reminding ourselves that to get some action we need a view. Probably best just to have an ad hoc one now that we call homepage, and we see how the plumbing works. We get a request in, we send a response back, And we can do a pretty simple version if we only want to send text. We don't even have to fool with templates. Okay, so the first thing we do with Hello World is that we have an example that will work because we have the code in the URL, we have the code in the views, but we don't have any corresponding template because we don't really have too much to format. So that's what we get done here. Here's the code that goes into the URLs, and we saw the code that goes into the views. And you crank that up, and you run the server, and you get back hello again world, and you kind of understand the plumbing a bit of the Django infrastructure, okay? But we haven't introduced templates yet. Well, templates are going to help us to format the output. Okay, so let's go in and look at this, where he goes now. The next thing he does is in this example 4.4, he says, well, you know what we could do? We could, instead of just putting out arbitrary text, let's go in our view and let's get some data out of our model, and then let's turn that into a character string that has some kind of easy to understand data that we got from the model, and then display that instead of some arbitrary string. And that's what we do here. What we're doing is that we're trying to put out a list of the tag names separated by comma spaces. And we do that. So you can make that change in views, and you can run that, and you should be able to see real data coming out. We're still not using all of the plumbing. We're not using all the pieces because we're not trying to format using a template, but we are doing more useful work. Okay? Now, down here when we get to example 4.6 is we're trying to imagine what we would have to do to format useful output if we didn't have the template functionality in Django, which would be, well, we would have to put all the formatting code in with our control code, okay? Because our controller in terms of MVC, the big C of MVC, it's made up by a little bit of the routing from the URLs and a lot of the code that's in views, which is where this homepage is. So in addition to this kind of managing the big picture of the transaction that's going on, homepage here has to put out all this formatting code. And what we really want to show is you could do it here if you wanted to, but it's awfully busy code. And it turns out to be pretty hard to maintain. Why is it hard to maintain and why is it so busy? Well, it's pretty hard when you have to code your HTML tag information when you have to put it into Python strings, which is essentially what we've done here. We've built up one big string, there are more modern ways to do that. And what are they? They're things like the template function that we're learning about in the chapter. Okay, so you can put the code in from example 4.6, and you can run that, and you'll get some output again, and it'll be a little more formatted because it'll look more like a proper HTML page, because I guess it is a proper HTML page, but it's a headache to code this way. Okay, and so we're not really doing this to teach you to code this way. We're doing this to get you to appreciate why we use templates. Okay, so now we move down and we say, okay, now that you've seen what a pain in the keister it would be to have to do all that without templates, let's see what templates can do for us. Okay? So, and he takes a pretty easy start on how to build a template. First of all, he's saying here, now, one of the things that is interesting is that early on, if we just back up, if you look at what he's doing up in the early on stuff, he is giving us a list of, I think, the startups. No, he's giving us a list of the tags. So that's a tag list. Okay. When he comes down here, okay, and he starts to define a template, you'll notice that he's not defining a template for the tag list page. He's defining a template for the tag detail page. Okay, and that's fine. Okay, typically for each of the entities that we have in the model, each of the model classes, we're going to have a list page, which is going to be in a list of all the instances, okay, sort of an index page. And then we're going to have a detail page, and you're going to get to that by clicking on the item in the list that you want. So as we list them out on the list page, they're going to be in links, okay? And the link is going to point to the detail page. It's going to bring up the detail page for the link that you clicked. So I just want to point out that we come in here and we're putting together a tag detail page, and you're kind of getting the style of these pages because in this data model, tags are related both to startups and to blog posts. And so we have a section. So we're going to say, okay, for this particular tag, here's a list of the startups that use this tag, and here's a list of the blog posts that use that tag. And again, the style of this is going to be that as we list them, we're going to characterize these things as links such that the user can click through and get to the startup that uses the tag or to the blog post that uses the tag. So these pages that we're creating, they're going to be a combination of a list page for each of the model classes and a detail page for each of the model classes. And they're going to be they're going to show the interrelationships of them. And so you're going to be able to, by clicking on the links that we create, you're going to be able to hop from page to page to page. So it's going to be a very interrelated, very rich, free-flowing kind of user experience. Okay? So he has us work on the tag detail page, and then he goes, well, okay, we have the general idea. Now, where are we going to put all the things? In 4.8, he kind of shows us where things are going to go. And then he finally kind of tells us, okay, in these templates, how do we get data? How do we get data in amongst the tags? How do we get data out of the model and into the tags? And the fact is that we're going to have a variable name that is going to be accessible to us in our template, and we'll talk about how that becomes accessible to us in a little bit. And in this case, the variable name tag is going to have a reference to an instance of the tag class. So if we want to display the name of that instance, we just say tag, because that's the variable that holds the reference to the instance, and then the name of the property, name. And we put it into double curly braces. So what's going to happen is that it's going to go find that instance of the tag class. It's going to pull the name off. It's going to render it into a string, and it's going to plop it right down in the middle of the H2 and the end H2 tags. Okay, so that's how we get data into the template. All right. Now, the other thing that we can do is logic, because there are times when we want to create a list of things, right? If there's just one of what we want to list, well, that code that we saw already is going to work quite well. If there's more than one, if there's a set of things, then we're going to want to iterate over that set, and we're going to want to create some kind of a list, either an unordered list, the bullets, or an ordered list, 1, 2, 3, 4-ish things. So this word query set, if you paid attention during chapter 3, you would know that these query sets are what you can get back from queries of the model. So you might want to say, I want a list of all the tags. Okay, well, what do you get back? You get a query set. Well, it's a set of references to all the tag objects. That's a query set. Okay. So then, for instance, we can have a for loop. Okay, so the code in templates goes inside of these curly brace percent symbols. So a for is surrounded by a curly brace percent, okay, and it ends with a curly brace percent with n4 in it. Okay, so we say for startup and tag startup set all. Okay, so this is we are actually querying the model right here, just like we did at in chapter 3. And then we just iterate over this, and then every time we go through, we pull up the startup name. And how do we get that out? Well, with the double curly braces. Now, we're going to not put, you can see they're going into links here, but we're not going to put it into we're not going to give the URL yet. We're not going to put that into the href, because there is a handy way to get that generated for us nearly automatically by using features that we're going to learn about when we get to the URLs. So instead of having us hard code them here, he says we're going to leave them empty for now, because you can display something like this. Okay, when you click on a link where the href is empty, it just doesn't do anything at all. Okay, so you can even test this and click on the links. It's just not going to go anywhere. And then when we learn how to generate the URLs easily using features of the URL function and some kind of special annotations that we add to the model in later chapters, then we'll come back and we'll fill these in. Okay? So we're not going to waste our time with, the dumb version before a smarter version before the really smart version. We're just going to leave it empty. So here we go around in this for loop, and for each of these startups, we get the name. So we have a list of the startups just what we want. Okay. Um, and then he kind of shows us what this might actually look like with the data in it. Okay. Now there are a lot of little choppy different versions of this, and if you try to code each of these in by hand, you could be here for a while. And as a guy who did it months ago, I'm not sure that it's worth the time to do. But certainly type in all the things that you're going to need to do, that you feel that you need to do. Okay, now the next thing he tells us about templates, which is a pretty important thing, and has to do with this style of system, okay, is that the code that we had before that listed all the startups, it worked well if we had startups. But if we didn't have them, we would put out a startups section that was empty. Okay? And usually in this kind of system, we're more sophisticated than that. So he shows us here in 4.13 that there is actually more code. In addition to the for and end for, there's an if and end if. So here's the if, and here's the end if. And again, they go in those curly brace percents. So we can check if there are any startups, and if they're not, we can just skip the whole section. And this is the thing that some people do, okay? Now, we're going to do another version before we get to the end of the chapter, so don't even type that one in, okay? Because we have a more sophisticated version yet. And then we're going to come down here and let's see what we're doing. Oh, so he says here, well, let's use an if, else, and if. Okay, because he wants to show you that you can use an if, else, and if. Okay, that's not what we're going to do when we get to the last version of this, but you could. Okay, just like you could have used the other versions. And then let's go down a little further. Okay. And I want to get down to the last version of this one. Because he goes through here. There's a test for empty. Now let me find my way to it. Apologize. I'm going to put this on. I'm going to pause the recording until I have this to show you because I don't want to make you dizzy. So hang on. Okay, it looks like I found it here. So in example 4.30, we've come down to, this is in terms of the tag list. So we have been doing the startups. But he intermingles these, and they're kind of interesting to see how he develops them all. But what we're eventually going to do, what he's eventually going to recommend, is a special option of the for and the end for, which is what if it's empty? Okay, so we don't have we don't have to use an if, we don't have to use an if else. There's just a special capability for fors that hold the code of what happens when it's empty. So it's kind of like an else, but the code between the for and the empty is what happens when it's not empty, and the code between the empty and end for is what happens when it's empty. The code between the for and the empty happens for as many entries as you have on the list, the code in the empty only happens once because it's empty. Okay, so the code on the top part is pretty much the same, and we take the message that says, oh, we don't have any of these now, and we put that inside of the empty. Okay, and because we are in an unordered list, we put it on an LI, which means that we have a bullet that says that. Now, is that the only design you can use? No, you might think that if you have a bullet, that's a list entry, and maybe you would rather have something there that says we don't have a list. But this is the design that he goes with. This is the design that I'm going to use in my easy university, because I think we're going to try to follow him as we can. Okay, so that's kind of the end of where that code goes. Now, let's go a little farther down here towards the bottom. Okay, and so I just want to come down towards the bottom here, and I want to talk about what happens when we make this all work. And let's make this all work in the end. Okay. Okay. So here, right? Here is the code. Where's the URL? Oh, okay. Here is the code for our home page. And excuse me if I'm rolling around here. So this is what has to go into the view in order to get a template to work. Okay. Now, when we're working on the views chapter, we'll be doing a lot of this kind of stuff. But here's where we learn the plumbing between the view and the template. Okay. Okay. The URLs, we'll take a look at that when we run it. It's going to say if we just have the domain name, if we don't have anything after it, then we want to go to the home page. So we got it gives the name of the view homepage. So we come to home page, and the first thing that we do is we say, oh, well, the home page is going to be a list of the tags. Now, is this a good design to have the home page be one of the views? Yeah, it probably is. I mean, have the home page be the list of startups or the list of tags or the list of blog posts. Is that okay? Yeah, that's okay. What we're eventually going to do, though, is that we're going to forward the home page to a particular page. Okay, so this code that creates the tag list page, this is going to get its own home in a view that's called tag list or something like that, and the home page is going to actually forward to it. But this is just as far as we've got in terms of levels of sophistication. So what do? Well, we know because of the page that we're on that we want to get all the tags. So we get a query set back from the model. Okay, we have to tell it the template that we're going to use. Okay, so we put we use this loader, which is part of the templates package, and we call the get template method, and we pass it the name and the directory that this template is in. Here's how it finds the template. Okay, and then we have this thing called a context. Okay, and what does the context do? The context holds the data, okay, um, for it to be combined with the template. Okay, the template pulls the data out of the context. So we have to build a context. Well, interestingly here, the tag list is the context. So we have a tag list. How can we have it be known in the context? Well, we just say we want the name tag list in the template to be associated with this list, this actual Python list, tag list. Okay? And then when we go to render it, we say we want the template to, we call the render method on the template, and we pass it the context. So how does it know how to find the data? Well, it uses the names that we gave it, like we said, tag list, okay? And because we passed it the context, it knows that the name tag list in the template is mapped onto this Python list. Okay, and that's what makes the plumbing connect. And so what comes back when we render a template? Just a character string, okay? And so when we return, we build an HTTP response object, we pass it the character string output, and we send it back. Okay, so now you can really see how the action is really controlled in the view, right? Here's all the action going in here. We're retrieving the data from the model. We're hooking up the template. Okay, we're creating the context so the template can find the data. We're telling the template to render using the context. We're getting a character string back. We're returning that with HTTP response. Now, in subsequent chapters, we do a fancier version of this, but it's just all convenience coding. This is the plumbing. This is how it works. Okay, so the action in Django, we get the routing from the URLs, and that's what gets us here to the view. And then all the heavy lifting is done in the view, right here. Okay, and that's how we get everything connected to each other. All right. So, for instance, I'm just going to show you on my project. Okay, I've gone to the end of the chapter. Okay, so mine's called SU Organizer. I've shown you that before, and I've gone to the end of the chapter on it. And see if I can get this to work. Got two monitors here today, so it's a little challenging. Not too bad. Here we go. So let me close all the windows so I can control these. So here I am. And what I've done is I've just gone to the end of chapter 4. So I've got all the files here that I got from the books Git repository. I spun it to chapter 4 and I copied them all over. I did not clobber my DB SQLite 3. I clobbered all the other files in here, but not that. Okay, because in the books Git repository, it's not saving this file. So if you blow this file away, well, you're going to miss it. Okay. And let's just look at what I have here. We have the URLs. We're using the URLs from SU Organizer. So let's take a look at that. Okay, and there are two patterns here. if we type the domain name /admin, well, then we're going to go to the admin site. Okay, and we used that when we did the testing for chapter 3. Okay, if we if we uh, type in just the URL and we don't have any characters after it, so the characters that come after the URL are the empty string, because that caret says starts here and the $sign says ends here, and there's nothing in between the start and the end. So if we don't have anything after the URL, we're going to the home page. So that's probably the simplest routing that you can do. So that's why the URL works in the version that we have. And then let's take a look at the views. Oh, and homepage is just the name of the view. It's the name of the method in the view that we're in right now. Okay. Now, we're eventually going to learn when we get to the views chapter to code views as classes. Okay, there are class-based views, and these are method-based views. They're kind of older and more basic. But for right now, this is what we have. This is as sophisticated as it gets. We've got one view called homepage, and it has the code that we talked about. Okay, and then what's the template that we're using? Well, this view is part of organizer. So we're going to do organizer tag list. So tag list is here, right? Okay, and then how does it get its data? Well, I just want to point out that tag list is a name that we have bound to the tag list. Okay, so this is the name as it's known in the template. Okay, and back in views, when we created the context, we connected it to this tag list. So that's how it's able to pull out of that. Okay, and here's the rest of the code. You'll see we've got some stuff up here that has to do with parent templates and child templates. So we create a parent template, and so we've got that, and then we make all this work. And of course, we're using the version of this uses empty. So when we fire this baby up, all right, run the manage PyTask, and we're still getting this error, but we don't have to worry about it, at least right now. And run the run server. Okay, it's going to do that, and then I'm just going to click on the link, and you'll see that I get the tag list. Pretty good. Now the startup organizer, this code has come from the parent template. Okay, so this is this titles coming from the parent template. That's essentially a header, and this stuff down at the bottom is coming from the parent template. That's essentially a footer, and this stuff is coming out of our template, which is what we just created. Okay, now that's all you're going to get to work in this chapter. All right, there's a lot of other interesting stuff, and I'll point you to them. But in terms of stuff you can test, that's it. Okay, because we do create some other templates. Not all the templates we're going to need, but quite a few of them. But they're not hooked up to anything yet. because there isn't a URL pattern to uh, direct the action to the proper view, and there isn't a view to make the action happen. We only did that for one. All right, so this is all the testing that's going to go on in chapter 4. All right, that's where you should get. Now, what else should you pay attention to in chapter 4, and how important are they all going to be? Well, everything is important. Let's look at a couple of the sorry, this thing will never behave. Let's look at a couple of these. This is not where we want to be. We want to be in we want to be in chapter 4, and we want to be in let's look at template inheritance. Okay. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to use some parent templates, and in this case he's got kind of 3 levels of template. He's got one. He has a site-wide template that's going to be it's going to work for all apps, and then within that, each of his apps has a template for that app that's a child of the site-wide template, and then within the app, each of the templates that are kind of the the detailed templates, like the tag list and the tag detail, they're going to be children of the app-wide template. So he's got essentially 2 levels of inheritance in his pages. And what he wants to be able to do is he wants to be able to make it more maintainable, right? So we're not going to have to make changes on a lot of different files. Okay, so to make all this happen, let's look at what we do here. Here are things that he puts into the base template. Okay, so he's got a lot of interesting stuff here. Okay, and then I don't know why he's putting that in there. It's not going to make sense there. And then he walks this down through here. And here is the template for tag lists, and we say that it extends the base template. Okay, and then we have these things that we call blocks, and the blocks hold the content. Okay, and the content for the most part comes out of the model or from the Django infrastructure. Okay, and so we're essentially saying that these blocks are going to be placed in the parent template. So if we go up to the parent template, we've got 2 blocks that have to be filled. We've got this title block that has to be filled, and we've got the content block that has to be filled. Okay, and if you go back up, you're going to see in the last version of this, in the last version of this, we're going to have we've got a block title, and then we've got block content. Okay, so that's how we're making that work. Okay, so that's one of the things I wanted to show. There are all these filters. Okay, so let's take a look at these filters. Um, oh, before that, in 4.4, they talk about the fact that there's more than one template language for Django. The, the one that we're going to use is the Django template language, DTL. Okay, there are alternatives. Okay, um, we are not going to use any of the alternatives. The Django template language is certainly one that you should know. So that's what we're using, DTL. Okay, and I'm trying to find one other thing that they're going to show us here. So I'm going to put you on pause, and I'll be right back. Pause. Okay, I'm back. So in section 4.5.4, controlling the output of variables with template filters, and they're going to introduce us to title, length, and pluralize. Um, these template filters are additional features that help us pretty up our presentation. Okay. Now, title is a way to get um, a string into title case, right? So you may remember that in this blog application that we have here, that the author decided that he was going to put data into the database in lowercase, okay, and that he was going to control the case of it himself when he displayed it. Well, the title filter is the way he can do that. So he can use a title filter to shift things into a title case, like the title of a book. And that's going to work well for things like the title of a blog post. Okay. Um, uh, I think it's an interesting filter. I think the idea that you want to shift all the data to lowercase in your database is questionable. Okay. So it's not something that I'm going to emphasize. Okay. But it's here if you need it. And I think um, it's pretty well described in the examples in the text. Um, the next thing is you need to find out the length of some of these things in order to give a pretty rendering. So we have a filter that helps us with the length, and we are able to pluralize some things as well. So let's see if we get down here. Where are we going to pluralize? Okay. So uh, here's a way to get the text that you're putting out to be singular if there's only one, or plural if there's more than one. So if we're trying to say how many witches we have, we can say we have uh, 0 witches, we have 1 witch, we have 2 witches. Okay, and that's a way to kind of tidy up, not have to write a custom code for what you want. Um, but again, these are kind of nice to haves, and I think they kind of clog up the chapter a bit. So again, there's because we're taking the template first, and because we're only taking a peek at what code should go in the URL and into the view, we're only going to hook up one of these. So there's not a lot to test at the end, but there's a lot of examples and I want you to take a look at them. And again, I'm not sure that you really need to type all these in. I think you do better to put your time into reading and then making sure that you're able to get that one example that I got to get to work when you're done with the chapter. So that's it. I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye bye.